Boom, recording. Awesome. Shall we sit?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's it.
I'm sure.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Good. Hi, I'm Sarah Cunningham. I'm the gallery director here at PACE.
Oh, I'll get it.
Please. Thank you. Hi. Hi, I'm Sarah Cunningham. I'm the director of the gallery here at PACE, and I really have the great pleasure today of hosting this event about documenting Blasian March with three guests. We have Rohan Zhou-Lee, who is the founder of Blasian March. We have Stas Ginzburg, who's one of the featured photographers in the exhibition, and also Cindy Trinh, another of the three featured photographers in the exhibition. Unfortunately, Josh Pacheco let us know he is unable to, or they are unable to join us today, but we will hear a little bit from them in recording, and you can spend a little more time with them, even more on the audio guide, because we do have great interviews with all four of them in the audio guide. So also you can return to some of the conversations that we had today in the audio guide, because that's been really special and really robust. Today I'm gonna start asking a few questions, and then of course, I'm sure there will be conversation started, and then we'll open up to the floor for your questions as well. Before we get started, I just want to outline the structure of the exhibition so that we're kind of starting from the same place. The show is called Critical Connections, Protest Photography Past and Present. It was curated by Rohan and Sophia Ma, who's not able to join us today. Student researcher Hannah Arias, who's also in class this evening. We're in finals, so she couldn't skip. You understand, I know. And myself, along with our three featured artists, Stas, Cindy, and Josh. And we were inspired by the quote from Grace Lee Boggs, the civil rights elder, who said that movements are made from critical connections, not critical mass. Right? That's the kind of the starting point of our exhibition. We'll kind of think about that a little bit as we talk today. And each of our three featured photographers were invited to come bring their own work, of course, focused on Blasian March. They all have practices that are broader than Blasian March, but we were focused on Blasian March. And we here at PACE have received a really generous donation from George Stephanopoulos, who, as you know, is a news reporter himself, but has been collecting news photos from the 50s, 60s, and 70s for quite a long time, has donated a substantial archive of those photos to the university. And a lot of them focus on the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War. There's spaces here, there's spaces there. Each of the three featured photographers were invited to spend a great deal of time just going through the archive and select photos that they felt kind of connected to the work that they're doing. And so we'll talk about that some more today. So you see Cindy's work is here on this wall. Stas's work is here on this wall. Josh's work is the installation in this kind of enclosed space. And then the final section that we have is a section that Rohan curated, which goes from here through to there and includes 18 additional contemporary photographers who've been really documenting Blasian March as well, some of whom are here today. I know I just met Erica. Are there other photographers here today? Emma. Hi, Emma. Thank you. And also 9 additional historic photographers. So just so you kind of understand the structure of the exhibition as we begin our conversation. Okay? All right. So to get started, though, I want to start with asking Rohan. Yeah. What's Blasian March, and how did it start?
I don't know anymore. Well, Blasian March, we are essentially a Black, Asian, and Blasian solidarity initiative, and we build that through one, education on parallel experiences of racial violence, as well as two, mutual celebration through the arts. And we started in 2020 during the lockdown, and for me, being a Black Asian in that time period was pretty difficult. We had on one hand Derek Chauvin's murder of George Floyd, which reignited, for many people, a resurgence in the Black Lives Matter movement. Simultaneously, in 2020, we saw the political uprisings of the Asian American community with Stop API hate. And for me, I definitely was trying to navigate both sets of community. Like, how can I, as a Black Asian, truly be in both spaces? And due to anti-Blackness and anti-Asianness in both sides, I wound up being like, you know what, I need my own space. So the Blasian March was born October 11th, which is also National Coming Out Day. And I was like, you know, that's fitting. And it's just gone from there ever since.
So Cindy and Stas, how did you connect to Blasian March? How did you end up working with Blasian March?
I first met Rohan in 2020 at the first Blasian March through my friend Kalyan Mendoza, who I've organized with, for many years. We met actually in the beginning of BLM years, like 2014, 2015. So Kalyan actually invited me to Blasian March. They were like, there's this really cool new initiative happening about Black Asian solidarity. We'd love for you to come take photos like you normally do. And I was like, great, I'm there. Anything for Kalyan. And so when I got there, initially I was there to take some photos for Kalyan and kind of showcase the work that they were doing with their organization, Nonviolent Peace Force. And from there, I just connected so much with Rohan and connected with the mission of Blasian March so much. I was yearning for a space like this as well, just because I had been documenting BLM since 2014, and I found that there was a lack of Asian representation in the movement, and I was really disappointed to see not as many Asian folks showing up. And so when Blasian March was born, I was like, this is the kind of space I've been yearning for too, a space that we can acknowledge Black folks, Asian folks, be in solidarity with one another, work together, be in community with each other, instead of having white supremacy pit us against each other like historically it's always been, right? So yeah, that's how I got introduced to Blasian March, and then ever since that first initial meeting with Rohan, I just showed up as much as I possibly could, which is every year.
I first met Rohan actually at Stonewall Protest, which was a space that was created in the summer of 2020, specifically for Black, queer, trans folks. And that space was created by two Black trans women, Joe Rivera and Queen Jean. And I first saw Rohan there. It was a community of queer trans people that met every Thursday for an entire year, which is incredible. And I remember my first pictures of you were from those actions, which were epic. They were epic marches, and it was just incredible. And then you started doing your own thing, doing the photo, and it was very much a continuation of queer and trans representation in the community. You sort of brought a lot of people together, all over Pakistan too, I thought. So I just had to be there, of course, to support you and the rest of the folks that I met at Stonewall. And it's been 5 years already, which is really incredible. So that's how I got involved.
So I'm making notes. Should you finish that?
No.
Just checking.
Thank you.
Just a quick little follow-up. Stas and I are also in a book together called Revolution is Love. It was published by Aperture, and it's all about that year of the Stonewall protest. Rohan's photo is definitely in that book as well.
The photo of me there. I was like, oh, look.
Yes. So been hanging out for like years now. You know, we've been working together for years now.
And so I want to ask our photographers, why is photographing protests important?
For me, photographing protests is important because it's documenting our history. I mean, look at the archival images we have up on the walls right now. We have these images because photographers took the time and the effort to be out there in the streets to document the history that they were witnessing at the time. And I know it's kind of corny to say, but I want my photos to be seen, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, and we can look at the struggle that we went through, the fight that we had to endure, right? The fight for liberation, the fight against our oppressors, the fight to survive in this country. And I think documenting that history is so important so that we can continue to learn from our history. We can continue to learn from the ancestors, learn from organizers, learn from activists who have been doing this work for so long. And it's really just like a time capsule. That's what photography is to me. It's like a time capsule, and we can look back and we can reflect, right? Reflect on what we went through, and I think that's really important. And I think imagery in general, like any kind of visual arts, has the power to really impact people, right? It can leave an impression on the viewer. Like I want my photos to be seen by folks, and I want people to feel something from them. I want people to feel like any emotion, whether it be anger, frustration, or joy, or motivation, or inspiration, right? It could be any emotion. I just want people to feel some kind of emotion from the work that I'm putting out there. And that's why it's so important to me to continue documenting these protests, because I want people to get engaged and get involved, and I hope through my imagery that they get inspired to.
Oh, really amazing answer.
And just everything that they said. Thanks, Stas.
I definitely want to build on the idea of archive and a time capsule, but I don't consider myself a protest photographer or a photojournalist. My focus has always been portraits, and if you guys look at my wall, it is mostly portraiture. And to me, photographing people or making portraits of people feels more important because, and particularly my focus is actually queer and trans, non-binary folks portraiture. And yes, I do want to build an archive of these portraits to say that this community exists. These folks were out there on the streets. You can now look at their faces, look them in the eyes, and feel maybe an emotional connection to them looking back at you. And it is definitely a time capsule, what people are wearing, how they choose to present themselves in front of my camera. That's all kind of part of this archive that I've been putting together for the past 5 years. And the street shots are more photojournalistic reportage photography. That's, for me, that's kind of everything that happens in between those portrait moments.
And Rohan, I know that you're not the photographer in this case, but you're the subject. But I'm curious, like, in terms of what role does documentation, especially visual documentation, play in movement building?
Oh, wow. I'm going to approach this as a writer, as a storyteller, as a performing artist who loves to tell a story to move people. I'm of the perspective that the narratives we tell ourselves dictate how we mobilize the community, right? So, I mean, for the longest time, so much, particularly Black Asian solidarity history, has been erased from public knowledge. The fact that the earliest known moments of Afro-Asian solidarity date back to like the late 18th century on this stolen land. or even how, queerness and queer folk have been just so directly erased from narrative because of how we have documented, how we have told the stories through documentation. So for me, not just Blasian March, but all the other spaces, this is why I think photographers are so critical. Documenters, video takers are so critical to movement work, because now we have a story in a shot, and that story will then tell or inspire folks on how to move forward. And that's really how we build mobility, how we build movement, is through the stories we're telling each other. And how we tell those stories, really.
Also, in the audio guide, Cindy, you talked about kind of how, quote, the media portrays protests and how you aim to portray protests. Would you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I actually got inspired to start my account, Activist NYC, because I was so disappointed and just really disliked how the media portrays activists and protesters. And it really started for me during Occupy Wall Street back in 2011, when I was heavily involved in that movement. I just saw how the media portrayed a lot of the activists and the protesters, usually as like lazy with no jobs, just like delinquents, like always focusing on the rioting or the looting, which is very, very rare. It rarely ever happens, but that's what the news likes to focus on because it generates headlines for them. And I started thinking, well, I want to show what I see at these protests. That's why I started Activist NYC in the first place. And it's really like an account dedicated to the activists that show up to these protests. It's a lot of intimate portraits, the intimate close-ups of the activists. I'm also usually very much a part of the protest as well, so I'm getting pictures from like within the protest, not just outside of it. And I started Activist NYC as a counter to the mainstream media, and in doing so, I've connected with so many amazing people, and this is the work that the mainstream media doesn't do. They don't connect with the community on a deeply personal level. I really, really made it an important part of my practice to connect with the folks that are on the ground, that are at these protests. And so it's always been like a way for me to showcase, okay, this is what happens at protests 99% of the time. Most of the time, it's people that are just peacefully protesting, marching in the streets, chanting, being in community with each other, holding a sign, really. Like, a lot of people are just standing around holding signs. That's what a protest is, right? And I wanted to focus on, like, more positive, joyful aspects of protesting, not just these, like, clashes with law enforcement, because I know a lot of photojournalists like to show that. They love to show clashes with law enforcement. And I've taken those kind of photos too, don't get me wrong, but I tend to not make that my focus at all. Because I think showing that kind of imagery just creates like a negative stigma in the public's eye. Like they see, oh, clashes with law enforcement. These activists are being so unruly, so violent, right? And that's why I hate the imagery that you see in so much mainstream media of activists, just shown in a very negative perspective. So yeah, my work is just really showing like what I see most of the time when I'm at protests, and it's always usually very peaceful.
I want to add to this conversation a little bit, a clip from Josh, who isn't able to be here today. Let me see.
I felt activated by the murder of George Floyd, and I didn't know what to do exactly, but I knew I had a camera, and that I was interested in what was happening outside and on the streets. Of course, this was during the pandemic, right? And everybody was, this was the height of the pandemic. So there was a lot of risk to going outside. like on the ground versus what media was feeding me, and then also to uplift marginalized voices around me and give these photos to activists that were interested in maintaining an organizing structure. And that way they can use this on their social media platforms, reach out to their communities, and building these coalitions to better their environment, whether that be through local government or grassroots organizing in a more abolitionist space.
Also think about kind of what the role of photography might be. I think Stas, I'm also really interested, like this real commitment to portraiture in the protest space. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I relate to a lot of what Cindy and Josh just said. I was also going out onto the streets just to see with my own eyes what was going on, because the news cycle was like end of the world and so anxious with everything that's going on. I just need to be out there and see it with my own eyes. And I actually wasn't even bringing my camera to the first maybe 2 or 3 actions that I went to. I just went to participate and really just to observe. And I started seeing like, oh my God, so many young people out here on the street leading this movement, leading these marches. And I was meeting people who are 17 years old, like 19, 20 years old, leading these marches across the city. And I thought, this is amazing. Oh my gosh, what was I doing when I was that age? Certainly not mobilizing thousands of people and chanting, and everybody was so well spoken, and I was just truly, truly in awe of this young generation. So I thought to myself, okay, next time I'm bringing my camera, I have to start documenting this, and I kind of like fell into making portraits, which I've actually never really done before in my photography practice, so this was really new for me. And it was tricky at first, but eventually I kind of met the Stonewall protest community, and that's when I just felt kind of at home. This was just an incredible community of queer and trans individuals, and it's so welcoming and just connected with so many people.
So this exhibit, right, is kind of a pairing of your contemporary works with these historic images from the Stephanopoulos Collection. I'm wondering for all 3 of you, as you viewed the historic photos in the archive, what stood out to you, and how did you begin? It's so many, right? It's a very large archive, by the way. So I can say from my personal experience, it's a little overwhelming, right? To even like begin to like think about like how do you choose. So how did you start to make sense of the archive? Why did you begin to choose these photos to pair with the contemporary works?
Me?
I
I get to go first. So I guess for me, again, going back to story, like, right, like what story am I getting from these photos from the civil rights era? And from there, what stories do I see in the works of these incredible photographers? Actually, a couple of photographers are here. I saw Gary walk in. Sean's here as well. And I think Erica already mentioned. I guess for me, it was more of where do I see the affirmation that we are doing the right thing here, because we've seen how monumental the civil rights era was and like how it advanced human rights. So to see repetition of story can be a little frustrating, knowing that the things we have been fighting for generations, we're gonna have to keep fighting for, unfortunately, for more generations. But there is an affirmation in each pairing of photos to let me know that the work we're doing does matter. The work we're doing is going to tell a story at one point in time or another. So I have an admiration for you two and Josh and just everyone else around me. Just wow, I'm in awe of all of y'all.
For me, when I was going through the archive, I mean, just the first initial emotion that was felt for me was when I looked through the Vietnam War photos, because my parents are from Vietnam and my mom is a war refugee. So looking at the photos of a time when I wasn't alive yet, but my mom was, and I know that she has so much, she has so much trauma, you know, so much trauma from the war. And when I was looking through the Vietnam War photos, I felt like my mom was there. And I think that created such a visceral emotion in me. And then it also reminded me of why photography is so powerful, because I wasn't there and I wasn't alive yet, but I'm able to look at these images and picture, you know, what my family had to go through, what they had to do in order to survive, to escape war and genocide. And, you know, my mom only recently told me, because she can't talk about it, but she only recently told me the day of what happened on the day that Saigon fell and she had to flee. And, you know, just bombs and bullets being rained everywhere, all around her. So just seeing these images, especially the images of the Vietnamese women fighters, wow, that made me super emotional. That was just like a very initial reaction when I was looking through the archive. And in terms of my thoughts on pairing my photos with the archival images, you know, most of the images, I thought of pairing simply from a composition view, or oh, the composition is similar, or even hand gestures, right? Like the fist in the air, that's such a powerful image of protest. And you know, just at protests, people always put their fists up in the air, right? And so just like hand gestures, composition, or the subject matter of the signage. But the Vietnam War photo pairings for mine kind of cuts a little bit more deep for me. I paired the image of a Vietnam War soldier, you know, kind of being arrested and tied, and he's obviously has limited mobility. I paired that with an image of an Asian person holding a sign, and there's in Vietnamese on the sign, you know, it says Black Lives Matter in Vietnamese. And actually the translation is literally Black people are deserving, in Vietnamese, or the literal translation is more Black people deserve to live, versus Black Lives Matter. The translation is a little bit rough, but it speaks to me to the reason why, as a Vietnamese person, I want to stand in solidarity with Black folks in this country, because we have been treated like other. We have been treated like foreigners. We have different, obviously, histories, and we have different experiences, right? We experience racism very differently, but what is the same for all of us is that the racism we experience is all under the umbrella of white supremacy. It is all under this umbrella of, you know, white supremacy dictating to us that we are not worthy. We are not, you know, we don't deserve to exist in this country. And so, to me, that's the connection. Right? And then the other Vietnam War photo immediately reminded me of the image we've seen over and over and over again in Palestine of an IDF soldier holding a gun at a farmer's head. And that, to me, and that Vietnam War photo is literally the same exact image of a soldier holding a gun at a farmer's head who's just on the ground, wearing that typical farmer hat. And it reminded me so much of the images we're seeing right now in the conflict and the genocide that's happening in Palestine. So that's why I paired it with the two images that I took in 2021, because this is an issue, by the way, that has been going on well before October 2023, but those images are from 2021, and I remember why those folks were wearing, why that person was wearing a Free Palestine shirt, why that person was wearing, holding a sign about Palestinian self-determination, because in 2021, that's when a journalist, a Palestinian-American journalist, was killed by Israel. And there was a lot of protests in 2021 that I went to, that I showed up for. So those connections, for me, felt really personal. It felt a much more raw for me, much more emotional for me, mainly because that trauma of genocide and war still lives in me through my mom, through my family. And that's why I care so much about solidarity with Black folks and with Palestinians and with all of our brethren. We're all connected, right? And that's something that we have to keep reminding ourselves, is that we're all connected in our struggles, our fight for liberation, our fight against white supremacy. We can all connect to each other. We can all relate to each other in this fight, whether you're Black, brown, Asian, indigenous, whatever you might be. We can all find a way to relate to each other. And yeah, that's why the critical connections theme was really on point for me. And I really love that you took that from Grace Lee Boggs, because it's about these connections, truly.
Wow, what an incredible story.
Thanks, Stas.
I'm blown away. For me, I think I went into the archive thinking I want to find as many portraits as I can from that time period, because I want my wall to be just a sea of faces. That's kind of what my original vision was. And I did find some portraits, but I also saw some really incredible street photography that stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, oh my gosh, I need to include some of this too. And that actually forced me to go back to my imagery and pair them with some of the reportage street photography from Blasian March as well. So the repetition of imagery and the hand gestures and signs, it's real, and it's really interesting to see that thread through the time and history. The portrait that, one image that captivated me immediately was this kind of a snapshot of Coretta Scott King. You can see guys there, she's kind of waving her hand. She just arrived in the evening, the day before Women's March in Washington, D.C. And she's probably saying hello to the big crowd in front of her, or maybe the reporter. But she was, of course, an amazing person, wife of Dr. King, and she was an incredible activist and humanitarian in her own right. And she actually fought for queer rights. She was very active in the 80s during the height of the AIDS epidemic. And she went into the hospitals and talked to people, particularly to gay men, and who were shunned from the society because there was such a stigma associated with this virus. But she talked to them, she held their hands, and she listened to their stories, and she actually said gay rights, queer rights, and she fought for the right of queer people to have families and to have children. So to me, she really embodies this intersectional movement and intersectional liberation. Herself as a Black woman, fighting for the rights of queer and trans folks, and that directly relates to what Rohan is doing with Blasian March, because it is truly such an intersectional movement of Black people, Asian people, queer, trans women. You really brought everyone under this one kind of umbrella, and everybody who came to your marches, they truly want to be there. Because they believe in you, they believe in the cause, they believe in Blasian March, and it is a real community. Thank you.
Actually, could I just really hang on both of y'all? Everything. So, one thing I also noticed a lot in the historic archive was, especially coming from a lens of Asian American politics. You know, there's photos of Prescott King, there's a photo of Angela Davis somewhere. Right. However, within the archive, there was never a photo of, say, Grace Lee Boggs, or Kyoshi Koromiya, an openly gay survivor of the Japanese internment who marched with King on Selma. When King was assassinated, he was the one who looked after the children. He was also the first openly gay panelist at a Black Panther Party convention. So and then to see the only stories of Asia or Asian America was Vietnam War, where I think a lot of times we see, and correct me if I'm wrong, Cindy, but I definitely feel a lot of times, especially if the photographer is not of that community, how Asians get to be erased or a specific narrative is imposed on Asians. So for me, it was also important to showcase all the faces who have come through, you know, the Blasian March, to show, you know, there has been an erasure of our solidarity work. There has been an erasure of these figures within Asian American history, who, if we knew them, if we had those in our textbooks, would that change our local climate? So I think for me, it was really important to also show all of these things, to explicitly showcase Black Asian solidarity and explicitly step into that legacy that's been so often wiped away.
I want to open up the conversation. I'm sure folks might have some questions that they'd like to pose, either everyone or specific members of our panel. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to contribute to our conversation?
This is for everyone on, has your work changed? Like, has your lens, like, I'll start with, like, I just met you as well and stuff, but like, how has the last, like, 4 years, like, shaped your work? Like, there could be 10 questions in here, but like, your work has shifted through movements such as Blasian March, or do you see your work different if you look back like 20 years?
Oh, for me, absolutely. I mean, it completely changed the direction of my work, because before 2020, I wasn't even doing portrait photography. My photography was completely different. It was more abstract, more introspective, and I've never really done portraits, especially portraits of people that I've never met. So, yeah, to me, it was a radical change. And even from 2020 to kind of like the portraits that I was doing then to now, the work also changed and matured, I hope. So I definitely know like what I'm looking for now. Like I pay attention to the light that I need, the background that I need. There's definitely, I've kind of developed a style that I know is kind of like the signature of my work. And yes, it definitely has evolved, and the movement has been absolutely, for me, it's been so radical to my own art practice.
And I would say that, I mean, you also like took this work and then moved into like the interior works that you're doing. So like that this informed the kind of portraits that you're doing.
Yeah. So for the past year, I've been photographing the queer trans community in their living spaces. A lot of the times it's just a bedroom, or somebody lives in a van, or different kinds of situations. And that really slowed me down, because when I work on the street, I literally have maybe 2 or 3 minutes tops to take a portrait of a person before they kind of like get bored with me, or they have to catch up with a friend because the march has already passed and they're anxious that they're missing the action. And so things on the street happen very quickly. And yes, I do know a lot of people that I see over and over in different actions, but a lot of people I just see them once and I never see them again. So I never really get a chance to talk to the person in depth and find out what their background story is. But now I've sort of transitioned into this new body of work, which is called Sanctuary, which is taking portraits inside people's homes. And that is a very much different process. And maybe it takes interaction, there's a lot of dialogue. I kind of want to understand where the person is coming from, what's in their room, certain objects, why they've decorated a certain way. To me, and all the people in that project are also from the LGBTQ+ community. So for me, the portrait of a person plus the environment is also creating an archive of imagery of the queer trans experience.
Yeah, for me, how many photographers are here in this room right now?
We have a lot of them.
Yeah,
We have a whole class.
how many, yes, right, there's a whole class. How many of you look back at some of your work from like even just a few years ago and you're like, I hate everything? Like, I know everyone's shy right now. Like, I think that's the plight of so many photographers, is like, I look back on some of my older work, I'm like, I hate all these photos. Why did I do this? Why did I edit this way? So I think my style has definitely changed over the years. Even for this show, like, you know, all these shows, this whole show, all these photos are, the earliest is from 2020, because that's when Blasian March was born. So even when I look at my photos from 2020, I'm like, ugh, I had to like re-edit some of them. I was like, I gotta re-edit these are terrible. I'm just being hard on myself. But like, you know, I know that my style has changed. And certainly my editing style has changed. But when I still look back at some of my old photos and I'm like, yeah, I still love these photos. Like, it's just a matter of progression. You know, like, you're gonna like some of your old work and you're gonna hate some of the old work, and then with the new work, like, I still hate some of my new work, you know? Like, it's always like a progression, and it's always, progress is never linear, right? Like, it's always a roller coaster. And when I look at my journey as a photographer, I think about all the ups and downs, I think about all the stresses and the struggles, and yeah, you know, there's a lot of times, this is something also as a photographer I've learned a lot over the years, is that sometimes it always depends on the vibe and the mood. Like, if the vibe is off, then my photos suck, you know? And if I'm really feeling it, then I think my photos look better. It really does matter if your heart is in something. That's why, like, for covering Blasian March, it was so joyful for me to cover Blasian March. So a lot of these photos from Blasian March, like, I love, because it reminded me of the joy that we experienced when we were marching in the streets, you know, when we were coming together. So I don't know, I'm kind of rambling, but like a lot of times, I think when you look at your work, like, past and present, it became more apparent to me that, like, what do I care about? What do I love so much that it reflects in my work, versus like the work that I don't like so much anymore is usually because I wasn't having a good time, you know, like, or I wasn't feeling inspired, or I wasn't feeling motivated that day, or the action or the event just didn't speak to me. But yeah, I mean, of course the work has changed over the years, but like Stas says, there's a significant style that you develop, right? Like, I look at Stas's work, I look at JP's work, and I immediately know it's their photos. And that's what people say about mine, right? Yeah, right? Like, that's what people will say about my work. They're like, I immediately knew that was your photo. Like, even if they didn't see my name credited, they might see it somewhere floating on the internet, and they're like, this is yours, right? Like, this is yours. Actually, Emma did that to me the other day. Emma sent me a photo, like, this is yours, isn't it? Because Emma knows my style now, and like immediately recognized that like this was a photo that I took. So you definitely develop a style. The style takes years to perfect, years to figure out. But then once you figure that out, then you've found your voice as a photographer. Anyway, oh yeah, questions, right?
Hi. So it's good to see you, by the way. I'm really curious as people who have existed these spaces for a while, what your suggestions are to younger people, because I know your community that surrounds your identity and your community for you as a person. Obviously they're different sizes, but just what your guys' experience and any like suggestions you have for young people kind of trying to build theirs, both in their like identity, but just also for your well-being and your health and everything.
First of all, that's such an amazing question. Thank you for that. I guess my immediate response is really put what you believe into the craft. And of course that takes time to figure out what you truly believe. Do I believe what I'm being told by an outside narrative, or do I truly believe the stories that I have taken with me? I mean, like, as an elder now, the elder I am. Help me now. I mean, I moved here in 2000. Well, I'm not gonna say it. It's dating myself. Oh, gross. Well, I guess December 2018. Yeah, I had you know, and within that year, I came here trying to make it as a dancer, and you know, I was always telling myself, you know, as a dancer of color, anything I do is going to be an act of revolution because of the way that our society does not want dancers like me to exist in any capacity. Which was a great way to like ground myself, think about the work I was doing. Of course, that still opened up the doors for the work I did was still based on someone else's vision about my body, or someone else's vision about how I exist. Like someone's like, oh, well, you're 6 foot, you got a beard, clearly you're a guy. And I'm like, well, sort of, not really, funny. But like, this work has really changed in me in a way, because now the work I do as a dancer is so rooted in my political ideology. So, like this work, thanks to Blasian March, I would not have gone to like other cities to do Blasian March. We've mobilized in 8 cities around the world now, which is kind of wild to me. A couple of years ago, we had an action in Zurich, Switzerland, where I choreographed my own ballet. That was about police killings of Asian Americans, something that you would never see in the dance field here. So I really think it's so important that you really put what you believe into your work. Because yeah, it takes you places you would never have thought, you know? Yeah.
My advice is usually practice, practice, practice. That's something that I actually just talked to someone the other night about this, because she was asking me about how to develop her own art practice because she's just starting out, and I was like, you just have to do it. You just have to do it a lot, over and over and over again. I taught myself photography. I'm self-taught, and I taught myself by being out at the protests and taking tons of pictures. I mean, I'm talking thousands and thousands of pictures, and showing up like at protests, like at times every week, you know, multiple times a week even. And practice, practice, practice. I just was out constantly practicing, just doing it. I think a lot of times we get anxious and we get insecure and we get in our heads about things, and you know, we constantly like, oh well, what if my stuff sucks? What if I hate it? Well, that's okay. Like, not everything you do is gonna be great, actually. And that's how you learn. You have to do the bad work before you can do the good work, you know? And so in practicing, you're gonna mess up. You're gonna have work that you hate. You're gonna take pictures, or in this case, whoever you might be, if you're an artist or illustrator, writer, anything, right? This is not just photography. You're gonna write stuff, you're gonna draw stuff, you're gonna take pictures that you're gonna hate, and that's just the nature of the process. And you just have to accept that process And so I think a lot of like young folks who are like, they ask me, you know, how did you get started? How did you build your practice? Because speaking of elders, I gave myself away earlier by talking about my work with Occupy Wall Street, you know. But like it's just it's literally just putting yourself out there all the time, no matter what, and you have to accept that people might hate your work. I've had so many people criticize my work, so many. And a lot of times I will cry in my room and be like, I'm quitting, I'm never doing this again. And those are the deep, like, you know, the nights where you're like, I really am questioning myself. And I think we all go through that. I think a lot of us, especially artists and creatives, we go through that constantly, that constant questioning, the imposter syndrome. Oh, don't get me started on the imposter syndrome, especially like me, like I didn't even start photography until I was in my 30s. So like I'm self-taught. So like I constantly get insecure about the fact that, oh, I'm not a real photographer. And that's so wrong. I know I am a real photographer, but I think we all get it into our heads like that we don't belong. And I think that's also a condition of being like a minority person in the field, right? Like being a queer, non-binary, not a man in this industry is very, very difficult. And so like the imposter syndrome gets to you, the pressures of society will get to you. But what I try to, I think young people, what I really admire about young folks today is their tenacity. Their tenacity and like their way of like just being so organized. Like I love how organized young people are, but their tenacity and just like their willingness and their openness and just how aware they are politically and socially, I think you have all of that working for you. And so because of that, like you can just really just practice, put yourself out there, do the work, don't question, don't like get too you know, worked up about like, oh, is this good, is this not? You just gotta do it. I know, just the Nike slogan, just do it.
I don't know if I can add more than that. I would say start with what you know, like maybe, and what interests you. Maybe it's your family, maybe it's your friends, something that's really close to you, something that only you have a perspective on. But also just things that interest you in general, because if you're really interested in the subject matter, it'll make your work unique, kind of by definition, because you'll have a unique perspective on it and you're invested in it. So I think that would be my kind of general suggestion. Yeah, just kind of start with what you know and try to find your people, your community, and I know it can probably take years, it's a new process, but it's worth it.
I think we have time for one more question if anybody has a question they want to add to the conversation. You all have a question. Something like
Yeah, your question would be great.
I have a question if you do.
Okay.
I do, but I'll let you go first.
Okay.
Well, so my question is, what do each of you, as you've worked on this exhibit, what do you hope that people will take away from this particular exhibit?
I'll go first. I need to.
We touched on it earlier, Rohan touched on it earlier, but what I want people to take away is that Black Asian solidarity exists and has always existed. And I think I was mentioning a little bit earlier about when I first started documenting like BLM, like back in 2014, how I didn't see a lot of Asian folks out there at the protests, but then when 2020 happened, like Rohan was saying earlier, there was, you know, the uprising after George Floyd was murdered, and there was the rise of anti-Asian hate and violence against so many elders and women and femmes, that were all, like, all of these issues started colliding with each other. And I was so happy to finally see conversation and dialogue about Black Asian solidarity. Like, I had been waiting for this moment, and I really, this was really the, like, finally the time. Like, I hate that, like, it takes traumatic incidents for people to care. You know, it's like, we should be caring about this, like, even without all this traumatic, like, terrible news. Like, we should just care about each other, because that's what humans should do. Like, we should have empathy for one another. But I was at least glad to see that finally the conversations were happening, right? And that's what I want people to take away from this exhibition the most, is that, like, hopefully it inspires people to look into the history too, because there is, like, a lot of history of Black Asian solidarity that we don't talk about enough, right? Like, the friendship between Yuri Kochiyama and Malcolm X. Actually, like, you should all look up about Black Asian solidarity after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. Like, actually, Vietnamese folks and Black folks were organizing together after Katrina to help each other out and help the community out. But these are stories that our mainstream media doesn't want to tell, because it doesn't fit their narrative of pitting Black and Asians against each other, right? Because that's the narrative that they want. They want the model minority, the Asians, to constantly be at, like, you know, divisive, like, they want that divisiveness with Asians and Blacks, because that propels their, you know, narrative, and it helps white supremacy, and it helps them continue to keep each other down, pit us against each other, so that we continue to fight against each other and not band together. And so that's something that I hope that people really take away from this exhibition, is look into more history of examples of Black Asian solidarity, because it has existed for a long time. But our media, our you know, entertainment, like all Hollywood, whatever it might be, they are terrible, right? Terrible at telling these stories. We have to find these stories, which is really, really unfortunate. But if you just do the research and you go out there and you look up, like, some of these stories, it's very inspiring. And I really hope that we continue this work of building, you know, together, building community together, building a coalition of Black Asian, like, strong Black Asian activists, organizers, artists, who are all doing the work to just bring us together more. And I think that's really the most important thing I want to come out of this show.
Yeah, this exhibit is very complex and layered. There's so much going on. Even if we were to do just an exhibit just about Blasian March, it would have already been such a complex show, because there's so many different issues and layers going on. Solidarity, Black people, Asian people, queer folks. But on top of this, we kind of, like, threw this element of time and archival imagery from the civil rights era. So there's just a lot to think about and process. And I guess I just hope that you guys will be kind of inspired to see the faces of people that were out there on the streets and were putting in their time and did the work and came out and really fought for their rights, or for the rights of all marginalized communities to, like, live freely and openly. And yeah, just be inspired from the photography point of view, from the social point of view, from the historic point of view, like, whatever you take away from it, there's just so much to think about. And yeah, it's kind of it.
Before I get emotional, wow. I just want to speak gratitude to every single photographer in this room who has come to Blasian March, because, I mean, compared to other folks in the movement and how people, or what people chose to show up for. You know, Blasian March has always been this little engine that could. You know, I feel like we never got, or we never have yet, you know, the same level of traction as, say, like Stonewall or some of the more mainstream activist spaces. You know, Blasian March has always been this, it's a little engine that could.
Oh.
It really feels like a little engine that could. And just being, throughout the years, seeing it manifest around the country in different hemispheres, which has been so bizarre to me, because I'm just, surreal, not bizarre, I should say. It's been surreal to me. Because like, I literally came to this city thinking I was gonna like have a dance career and be done, and this, it's really surreal. So I just want to gratitude to all of y'all for capturing this little baby who's 5 years old now, and she's got an attitude. It's interesting.
She's still figuring herself out.
She's still figuring herself out. What is my gender? What are my pronouns? All those things. I really want folks to leave here knowing that this was a movement of the people. I do not want to be the center of attention. I do not want to be the celebrity of the action, which I think, after seeing so many different forms of organizing in different countries, I definitely will say I think activism in the States really does celebritize people. There is celebritization in the movement. And I want people to walk away from this, or leave this space really seeing it was a movement of the people. It is a movement of the people. It is a choice of countless people around the world to join in this idea of Black Asian solidarity. I'm just facilitating. I'm just here. Yeah, community first. Oh, I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done.
Well, great. Then please join me in thanking our panel.